The general contract in video games is that almost all of them will throw menacing, violent enemies at you, and in return, you'll have the means to do away with them and journey on forward. Not always, though. Sometimes games don't let you fight back at all, or sometimes you can fight back, but it's all for naught because said enemy can't be killed. This is particularly common in horror games, but unkillable enemies can be found in plenty of genres, as this list shows. Just to get ahead of this one, there's no alien from Alien Isolation on this list. Yes, of course, our Xenomorph buddy applies, but I feel like he's had enough time in the spotlight. Let's give 10 other enemies a go. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 Invincible video game enemies that pissed everyone off. Number 10, the Mermaids, Inside. Inside, Playdead's 2016 follow-up to their classic platformer Limbo, offered up a lot of the same things we've come to expect from the developer. Interesting puzzles, a unique art style, and your total inability to fight any of the things that are trying to kill you. The answer instead to most of these encounters is run like hell, or in the case of the creepy mermaids, or sirens as they're also called, swim like hell. You like swimming in games, right? Who doesn't? All of a sudden, navigation is just a little bit harder and you're much slower than you were on land. All the better for these terrifying and invincible long-haired creatures to nab you and kill you. You're not even safe from them when you're in a whole-ass submarine, because they will break the window and drown you if you aren't shining a light on them, which they're not too keen on. These sections are certainly memorable and tense, but if you can't work out how to outrun these girls, they're more than a little annoying. Number 9, SLENDERMAN, Slender the 8 Pages. Now, we could have gone with any of SlenderMan's appearances in video games for this entry, but I've chosen the one that caused me so much personal fear, I'm sure it shaved years off my life. Before Parsec Productions made the fully fledged game Slender the Arrival, they made the free-to-play game Slender the 8 Pages. It's far more rough around the edges, but the absolute terror that SlenderMan instills, even as a low-poly model standing about in a low-poly building, is very, very real. You'll need to run around the forest exterior and a handful of interior areas searching for 8 pages. And if you haven't played it, trust me when I tell you that such a mundane task has never been this tense. It certainly doesn't help that the only tool at your disposal is a flashlight, and the only thing you can do when you see Slendy is to 180 as fast as possible and bolt in the opposite direction. Desperately trying to pick up a handful of pages and hoping you can do so before Slendy nabs you when you have to start all over again is as annoying an experience as it is absolutely iconic in horror games. Number 8, Pyramid Head, Silent Hill 2. Not every game with a terrifying, unkillable enemy designed to knock you down a peg or two leaves you unarmed. Silent Hill 2 is more than happy to set protagonist James Sunderland up with weaponry. It just so happens that none of those weapons are effective against the gigantic blade-wielding butcher with a metal pyramid concealing his head. Despite feeling like you're more than capable of taking out a nasty manifestation of James's inner torment or two when need be, there's nothing you can do about this guy. While you will sometimes need to do your best to take down this iconic video game baddie in Silent Hill 2, for the most part you'll just be running away from him and trying to stay out of his way. Perhaps the most overwhelming thing about Pyramid Head is that in the end, despite fighting your way through plenty of the things the game has thrown at you, his demise comes at his own hands and not yours. So if you were looking for some kind of grand vengeful last stand over James's subconscious demon, or your own frustration for being menaced by this guy the entire game, you are not gonna get it. Number 7, Astral Spike, Control. Like Silent Hill, there are very few things in Control that you can't take out with enough firepower, so it comes as a surprise and a tense shift in your expectations when you come across an Astral Spike. You'll come across these metastructural entities primarily in the astral plane, and they're absolutely terrifying. Unlike basically every other enemy in the game, there's very little you can do about them. They hunt you relentlessly, damage you if you get too close, and if that somehow wasn't enough to deal with, scream at you as they're attacking you. The little hurricanes of death are completely unstoppable and massively frustrating if you can't figure out how to navigate your way around them. There are loads of things you can do to make protagonist Jesse more formidable in Control, but try as you might, there's nothing you'll ever be able to do to take down one of these guys. Just stay away from the strobing murder ball, just trust me on that one. Number 6, Agents, Enter the Matrix. If you know anything about Matrix lore, then you're probably across the fact that there's very little you can do about the agents, and in 2003 action-adventure Enter the Matrix, that remains true. If you are hoping to live out your Neo fantasies and actually flatten a handful of these guys, you're unfortunately always going to be bested by the sunglass-wearing Guardians of the Matrix. I mean, you can certainly try to fight them, but they'll make you regret it every single time. It might not feel very action hero-y of you, but while playing as Ghost or Niobe, you'll just need to dodge their fire, or better yet, stay off their radar entirely as much as possible. Then run to the next safe zone and hope you can get there with your health bar relatively intact. Sure, you can knock them off a building or hit them with a bunch of grenades and then eventually they'll go down, but they'll just keep coming back as agents tend to do. Number 5. The Executioner. Alice Madness returns. Invincible enemies are pretty inherently annoying in and of themselves in video games, even when it serves the narrative. But you know what else is up there on our hit list of things we don't love video games doing? Making us run toward the camera. Despite being a masterclass in design and art style, 2011's action-adventure Alice Madness Returns achieves both of these with the admittedly effectively fearsome but hugely annoying enemy, the Executioner. The Executioner is a huge scythe-wielding baddie who even Alice, who takes out all kinds of nasty-looking things in Wonderland, can't put a dent in. His scythe attacks do, however, do quite a lot of damage to you, and he can also summon card guards to attack you as well, as if he wasn't giving you enough trouble. You'll deal with him in a couple of arenas, as well as some long hallway stretches where the only thing you can do is run toward the camera, desperately seeking some means of escape, like a small enough hole which you can fit through and he can't. The Executioner is very fast and there's very little room for error in these sections. It's particularly tense as there's nothing else in the game you can't aim one of your huge arsenal of weapons at and take out. Fortunately, the Executioner does not get away scot-free. Later in the level, you'll get to eat some of the Eat Me cake, and then Alice grows into a giant and you stomp right on him. So look, he's not completely invincible, but to little Alice he was. Number 4. Nemesis, Resident Evil 3 Remake. You can sub in your favorite Resi entry and giant invincible stalker type here because Nemesis and Mr. X both apply to this list just fine. We've gone with Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 Remake because even though you can stun the tyrant by dealing a significant amount of damage to him, you're not going to be able to stop him completely. That said, this is Resident Evil we're talking about, so you probably should be hanging onto your ammo wherever possible, so maybe just turn tail whenever this guy clocks you. Occasionally he'll drop umbrella supply boxes when you do down him, so you can grenade the heck out of him to try and nab those, but otherwise just stay out of his way until the end of the game when you're finally able to defeat it once it's mutated into its second form. Of course, whether it's actually dead at this point or if it's just gonna mutate again is anybody's guess, but let's just assume you got it. Number 3. Dungeon Guardian, Terraria. In short, the Dungeon Guardians of Terraria are not to be trifled with. If you choose to trifle with it, you will quickly regret it, because you can only do 1 point of damage to this thing, no matter what you're wielding. 2 if you can manage to land a critical hit, which you are unlikely to do because this thing will almost certainly one-shot you. The Dungeon Guardian appears in a world if you have not defeated Skeletron, and it can travel through all blocks. It does 1,000 points of damage and has 9,999 defense and 9,999 health. Technically, you could kill this thing with a lot of luck and patience, but there's really no reason to do so, except to obtain the Bone Key pet summon. This thing is so fast and deadly, it'd take you on average 9,614 hits to take it out in normal mode. I'm not sure why you would do that, but if you want to, then more power to you. Number 2. Gatherers, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. It's pretty common knowledge that Amnesia: The Dark Descent was a landmark survival horror game, particularly in the niche of games that leave you totally defenseless, which would be nerve-wracking enough, but add on top of that the relentless stalking from the hideous-looking gatherers, and you've got a recipe for a very scary time. And a very frustrating time if you're not a horror buff or a puzzle pro. Gatherers sound terrifying, look terrifying, move in a creepy way, reduce your sanity when you look directly at them, which you'll need to do occasionally to check where they are, and they're just bloody everywhere. No puzzle in Amnesia compares to the mental gymnastics you'll need to perform to remind yourself these guys are just pixels and you'll be fine. If for some reason you thought these malformed critters could stand to be more aggravating, if you play in hard mode, they move faster, do more damage, spend longer searching for you, and have an easier time spotting you. As I concluded in the last entry, why you would do that to yourself, I don't know, but if that's the kind of gamer you are, let me know down in that comment box. Number 1. The Hunter, Dead Space. Much like Amnesia, you could argue Dead Space is already horrifying enough as it is. Both games are experts at establishing a consistently tense atmosphere before even injecting their iconic enemies. Of course, Dead Space gives Isaac a whole host of different weapons to point at its spooky necromorphs, but none of them are all that helpful when it comes to the Hunter. The Hunter is a regenerating necromorph, which is not a phrase anybody wants to hear. Capable of extreme damage and speed, and an uncanny ability to elicit girlish shrieks when he pops out of nowhere. You can do your best to try and take out his limbs or freeze it with stasis, but you can't stop it entirely. Or you could just tuck your tail between your legs and bail, for which I promise not to judge you. These guys also just keep coming back every Dead Space installment, so if you think you've seen the last of them just because you incinerated one with the literal flames from the back of your shuttle, doesn't mean they're quite finished with you. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section which Invincible video game enemies keep you up at night. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDowell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.